So then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation is from the original documents of the Hebrews of old, from the time of Israel, from the prophets of Yahweh, indicating what's coming in our future as a nation, as individuals, and how we should then act when they come. So in terms of religions of the future, we are aware of we wash ourselves with the holy dam of the Messiah and we move on. Because what's coming, it's a great deal of trade and market, and the new era of then the Chinese market system is also coming, and we understand there is a definite gap from the rulership of the Gentiles versus then religion. The gap of religion and then Gentile rulership then met its end in 2009, and then comes the great era of trade, where then people are no longer going to try to find fault in someone else's life, but then they want to be busy with doing trade. This is the whole purpose, because we are living during the time of restoration, as it was then explained before, restoration of the holy cities, the city, up to the point of finding then even the old roots of trade, because we understand the land of Cush is going to experience the first city of this end of time, and from there lots of restorations are going to be then exercised and done. From there then goes up to Jerusalem, where the nations were used to go up there to worship Yahweh, and then having trade partnership with the nation, have discovered that the kingdom of Nubia was then known as the Black Pharaohs, where they had their own kingdom. We understand that the service area was further south, where they used to do then the plantations, and they would service the land, and they would bring then the grain up north, and they had the storehouses over there, so you must find then the storehouses, and those back then was in a form of pits where they used to store the grain, and then of course gold and precious metals. So then we can prepare ourselves for the great trade of the end. As we read then in Revelation, we find a third part of the ships then in Revelation 8. Then 10 chapters later we find then the nations doing trade with China. So truly there is no much time for idle talking or junkies, but educating the people of this new system coming, so then people are prepared to do trade. And then of course understanding the factor of second tabernacle services and then resuming the services. What's coming then absolutely sure is then indicating and then directing the people, those who are saved in the Messiah from the Hebraic line, to do their services. Is the utmost important, because this time is for then the rebuilding of the holy cities when we speak of the divine, so then the world can reach the harmony point, so then the others can do trade. This is the whole purpose. We must make sure to save the Hebraic people return to their services, and then the rest they get busy. So the whole purpose then begins when these people they return and they do what they should be doing, go around the world and form holy cities. As we are then living during the time of Yirmiyahu, the 61st chapter, then we understand Yirmiyahu 1:8 as being the land of Cush, the first place where we find then the holy city, and then from there more holy cities. and then the restoration then later of the city, Jerusalem. It was then explained in terms of Iran, we should not be hasty in our decisions, because before the government of Sadam, Iraq, he claimed he had nuclear weapons. We invaded the land and we could not find it. So it was a huge mistake. We ended up going to war with a nation, though it wasn't a very nice nation by the world's standards, because what he did to the Kurds many years earlier. But then we should never invade a land without a purpose. And so far, Iran, they are working on a nuclear program, but we don't know what it is, because of the lack of information. Same situation during the time of Iraq. So then the proper course of action is then inviting Iran and then for a talk in UN. Then people have to come up with a solution. Either having inspectors over there and verify what's going on, but we should never ponder the idea of invasion. Because if we do this, then we are placing ourselves in a very, very, very detrimental situation, jeopardizing our own economy, because our economy so far is very fragile. We are not recuperated from 40 years ago, the great expenses spent. And then we have to be responsible for the outcome of the war in the region, because then destabilize the entire region. And how are we going to do this as a nation without having China, the great country responsible for the end of time, trade, with a vast military, and then we find ourselves then stuck, unwisely provoking wars, and then not being able to go forward with it. Syria is at war, Lebanon is already entering the war, Kuwait has unrest. We are trying to put up new policies. The world does not want our policies, because we are not enforcing any more trade. We don't have trade anymore. We could before, because we had trade and manufacturing, but we don't have those anymore. So we must be wise and then not to go to war with Iran. They must come to UN, so then we can have a talk over there. While then the Chinese, we request from them patrols of the area, because they have a vast military for a reason, enforcing trade without invasion. The tough diplomatic trade talk. Then when the Chinese start doing patrols in the Middle East, then we are indicating to the world we want to trade. So much we want to trade in the development of the nations that we are retrieving as they move towards the conflict areas. Because we must be wise. And then Israel has to hold its nerves and maintain calm until they move their forces on the ocean, indicating trade. Then the balance of then war versus trade then is locked in place. But we must do this very wisely, because then we indicate that we want trade, we want development, and we do not want another war. Thus the Chinese would provide security, diplomacy, trade, and rebuilding without firing a shot. And from then on, then they use their vast military resources to maintain peace of the region. So then the world can prepare itself for the new system. Because every person then with a personal computer would have a chance of going over there, log in, and then invest. And as far as religion, each to his own. Some like some religions, some like the other religions, and then the other religions. Then the world would harmonize with the scripture. So when the Messiah was speaking to his people, he was indicating 100% the entire understanding of the scripture was for the set apart, for the Hebraic saved people. This is the core of the very understanding of the rebuilding of the cities is related with his people, not Gentiles. His people, the set apart, elect, Hebraic people from the time of Moses, selected from the world, saved from slavery, they would be found themselves then in the future requiring them to resume the second services. We Gentiles, we are not part of the second service. We are part of showing up at the gates and receiving ministrations from Ruach HaKodesh through the set apart. That's our part. And then the nations, at their desire, they come and they request a word of Yahweh as per their choice. While the others, they are busy doing trade. So we must maintain our understanding of the time of the end, because the prophecy at the time does not pick a particular religion. It is a mere combination of the 61st chapter and then the 1/8 chapter of Yeshayahu. Then he directed the focus of the divine factor of the Hebraic people return to their services, and then the Gentiles included, but at their own level. Gentiles are going to be busy doing trade. It doesn't mean they're going to abandon their religions, but they're going to be busy doing trade because the world is at war. But then, if we, USA, if we make the wrong move at the moment, we are going to ruin ourselves. We can be sure absolutely, because IMF already warned. They said our economy is very weak. In the next 4 years, if we don't fix it, we are going to break. The Chinese, they are simply waiting until our economy breaks so then they can move in. Europe, we understand the euro is breaking. We can't hold for very long. The lay people, they have to understand, or the regular people must understand economics. You have a system of a monetary value, and then you have many nations around this, in quote, belt of economics. But then they begin to unite from a prophecy where then Daniel said some of them are strong, some of them weak. And then the weak obviously would not be able to maintain the level. And then the other nations, they have to help them. But they are not, because the expenses are more than what they can produce. So they are not going to last for very long. Mideast is war. Syria at war yet. Libya has unrest. Egypt has unrest. Then we find Lebanon, Kuwait. What else? Are we then... we don't want to be labeled stupid, do we? If we launch any kind of a new idea out there, then we're going to destroy ourselves. Because the action is not the war. We're not interested in a war, we're interested in rebuilding. And then we're going to invade a nation without a nuclear weapon. So then we invite the person to UN. And then we request the Chinese to do their patrols, indicating we want trade. So then, in quote, opens the valve of a steam of anger from Iran from trying to develop a war to a talk. We are during the time period of President John, during the time that the ships of the Soviet Union were going to Cuba. That's where we are at, but in a much larger scale. And then we have the election on top of this whole situation, so it takes a true understanding person not to go to war, no invasion. You must divert this miserable factor of trying to invade a nation without having any proof of it. Then we must maintain our composure. And then the Chinese are there waiting and they can help. When they start moving in their navy on the waters and doing patrols, simple patrols, only making sure the security then is served. Then is the time for us to evaluate the forces and then maintain stability. If we go to war with Iran, it's going to be the ruin of our country. Because then we have to maintain the area, and then we have to understand the consequences of them not finding weapons, and then the world is going to get angry. And then our chances of having friendships around the world won't be there anymore. Plus our economy is ruined. So we must evaluate the factors, because it's not the war. We must shift our focus to trade, 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 trade. Every religion, trade. And then Gentiles, trade. Set apart, return to their services. And then later the rebuilding of the temple. And the rest of us work in trade. So that's the name of the game. Much more coming up. Please stay tuned.